Hi, everyone. This is a VPartySports Podcast. I'm Vasu Party previewing Week 14, the continuation of the NFL season, as we have a lot of playoff implications, a lot of division topics to go about, some fantasy football news, injuries as well, too. We'll have our best bet segment as well. As you see the live show going on right now, it'll be looped every hour on the hour. So if you missed the best bet segment or any of the information for players being injured, please feel free to go back on to Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Thanks to everybody on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter for all your comments, for all your supports. Appreciate it very much. Okay, coming up on Monday, we'll have a full review of the NBA and NCAA weekend. But right now, it's all about the NFL. Did you see the game on Thursday night? Holy cow, Thursday night. The Las Vegas Raiders, 6.5-point favorites, 42.5 over the Rams. Rams didn't have a quarterback. They signed Baker Mayfield, who was released on Monday by Carolina. He comes into Los Angeles cross country on Tuesday, has one practice on Wednesday, and goes out and leads a comeback win, down 16-3 with about 4 minutes to go. Cam Akers scores a touchdown on Raiders' soft defense, makes it 16-10. Already your point spread is thrown off there. You still got a shot. Maybe if this thing ties up, they may go over, but the odds were on the favor of the under in that game. And then the Raiders go 3 and out. Terrible defensive play by the Raiders on that second drive. Not to mention an unsportsmanlike penalty as well, too, knocking the ball out of the hands of one of the Rams players was the Raiders defense. 2 pass interference penalties, an offside penalty that caused a first down. It was just ridiculous how the Raiders lost that game. They were favored by 6.5. Wolford was going to be the starter. Mayfield came into play. Raiders, being the Raiders that they are, they had a chance. Honestly, they had a chance. If they won this game, they would have been at 6-7, and they still had an outside shot at looking into the playoffs. But with this loss, this come from behind win for the Rams, who are having an awful season. They didn't even have Aaron Donald. Aaron Donald, the best player in the NFL on defense, they didn't even play. And Johnson and Howard, their linebacker, who calls all their signals, he was out as well too. So they were really playing an undermanned Rams team. Baker Mayfield came in on 2 days work, 1 day learning the playbook, 1 day of practice, kind of basically shaking hands with everybody as you're getting into the huddle. John Wolford started the game. He went a couple of series. They alternated a little bit, and then Mayfield came in the second half. It was 16-3 at the half. And was it 16-3 at the half? I want to make sure I get that right. I think it was 13-3 at the half. Raiders were only able to manage a field goal. They had a chance to score touchdowns. Derek Carr threw 2 interceptions. Josh Jacobs, who leads the NFL in rushing, he had 99 yards rushing and did have a touchdown. Brian Skowronek had 89 yards of receiving on 7 catches. He was Baker Mayfield's favorite receiver on Thursday night. But a 17-16 win for the Rams basically eliminates the Raiders. Actually eliminates the Raiders. I'm going to say they're not even going to get close to the playoffs. But a 10-3 lead. Jacobs with the touchdown early. They had chances. They had a chance to score a touchdown before the half. Derek Carr throws an interception in the end zone, and a red zone turnover. Those cannot happen if you want to be a playoff team. I'm not sure what Josh McDaniels was thinking there, but they were going for field goals and not touchdowns. And the defense, who's been soft all year, gave up those yards in the first drive to make it 16-10. And then give Baker Mayfield credit. He had 230 yards, a touchdown pass. That touchdown was dropped in very nicely to Van Jefferson, 23 yards out. The extra point was good, and before you know it, with 10 seconds left, the game was over. There's no way. And then Carr throws another interception. For stats-wise, it was another interception, but it didn't really mean anything because the game was over after Van Jefferson caught that touchdown. So the Rams beat the Raiders on comeback fashion, 17-16. They are now 4-9. They're not going anywhere. Raiders now 5-8. So that was your Thursday night football debacle. All right, let's move to Sunday. You see the bottom line there with the ticker with all the games that are going to go on. We will get to the games in a second, but let's give you the scenarios as we go to it. Oh, for fantasy football players, let's make sure you know which teams are playing. We're still, even though it's week 14, we're still at buys. The Chicago Bears, the Indianapolis Colts, the Washington Commanders, the Atlanta Falcons, Green Bay Packers, and New Orleans Saints all have buys this week. I believe this is the last week of buys for the rest of the NFL season, 15, 16, 17, and 18. Yes, That is correct. The buys are done after this week. So the final 6 teams will get their buys. And for some of these teams, playoff implications, well, at least Washington, they're the only team that has a bye that's got any playoff implications right now after Atlanta lost last week and Tampa Bay came back on Monday night. By the way Tampa Bay came back on Monday night on the Saints, same exact way the Rams did against the Raiders last night. Soft defense, penalties, unsportsmanlike conduct penalties. That game should have been the Rams. That game should have been the Saints on Monday night. It was like watching those games back to back in a mirror, if that's the right way to put it. But 17-16, both games ended up on the final. But Baker Mayfield did come back on that. All right. So once again, the buys for the week: the Bears, the Colts, the Commanders, the Falcons, the Packers, and the Saints. The scenarios for the AFC right now: Buffalo and Kansas City are tied at 9-3. Buffalo has the tiebreaker. They beat Kansas City early in the year. They beat them pretty handily on the road. Kansas City hasn't covered a lot this year from a point spread perspective, but they are in second now with that 9-3 record. The AFC West is pretty much there. They're 3 games up on the Chargers, 5 up on the Raiders after Thursday night's loss, and 6 up on the Broncos, who they will play. They will visit Denver this weekend for their game against the Broncos, a 9-point favorite, as you'll see later on in the show when we get to the afternoon games. But Kansas City, the AFC West is pretty much wrapped up. Now it's between them and Buffalo. But when you look at Buffalo, the Eastern Division still up for grabs. Buffalo 9-3. Miami is in the number 6 spot. They lose the tiebreaker to Cincinnati. They lose the tiebreaker to Cincinnati. So Cincinnati is in the 5 spot. Cincinnati is in the 5 spot. Let me see if I got this right. Yeah. League, wild card. Oh, here we go. Okay. Cincinnati's in the 5 spot because Tennessee, even though they have a worse record, they lead the AFC South. And that AFC South, just like the NFC South, both divisions terrible. And they're both they're 7-5. But the Bengals are 8-4. They're tied with Miami at 8-4. The tiebreak based on head-to-head win percentage for the Bengals and Miami. So that's why they have the tiebreaker. The Jets are in the 7th spot. They're at 7-5. And the only other teams behind them are the Chargers at 6-6, Cleveland and New England at 6-6, Cleveland at 5-7, along with Pittsburgh at 5-7. Oh, they probably are both out. Cleveland may have an inside shot still at a wild card. Believe it or not, they're 2 back of the Jets, as is the Steelers, who are 5-7, 2 back of the Jets as well. In the NFC, the 11-1 Philadelphia Eagles are running the table. Let's go back to the AFC for a second. I want to break down that division for the AFC East. Buffalo with a 9-3 record. They're 1 game better than Miami at 8-4. Miami's in the 6th spot, as we said, but they're only 1 game back. The Jets are 2 games back of Buffalo at 7-5, and New England at 6-6. Might be a tall task for New England. Buffalo's already beaten them this year, but Miami and the Jets have both beaten Buffalo this year. Miami won at home. The Jets won at home. They still have to play each other another time. But right now, as of right now, the Buffalo Bills are 9-3, and they have the best record by virtue of the tiebreaker over Kansas City at 9-3. All right, then you go to the AFC North. The Baltimore Ravens, they're 3rd. They're 8-4. Tennessee is 7-5. Baltimore will be at Pittsburgh this weekend. See the line go by. The Steelers are favored by 2 with Kenny Pickens at wide receiver, the rookie wide receiver, Najee Harris, a running back. Defense has played well. They're on a 2-game winning streak, I believe. Yeah, the Steelers are on a 2-game winning streak right now. No Lamar Jackson for the Baltimore Ravens. Tyrone Huntley is the starting quarterback, but they will activate J.K. Dobbins. He's back at running back for the Ravens, so that could be a big help. Not a lot of scoring expected in this game, especially with Huntley. They were able to get that victory over Denver last week, 10-9, on a last few minutes touchdown by Baltimore to give them the 10-9 win. The AFC South, that division's over. Indianapolis choked it away last Sunday night, giving up 33 points in the 4th quarter. Tennessee has not looked good at all the last few weeks. They're on a 2-game losing streak, but they're 7-5. And we have an elimination. We have an elimination sighting. The Houston Texans are officially eliminated. They are officially on the clock at 10-1, and officially eliminated, not only from division contention, but also from playoff contention as well, too. And then we talked about the West, Kansas City, with that 3-game lead over the Chargers. All right, now we move on to the NFC. As we said, Philadelphia leading the world with everything, 11-1 right now, the number one seed. They have the tiebreaker edge over the Minnesota Vikings and a game up on the Vikings. So that's like 2 games up. They walloped Minnesota on the second Monday night of the year, 30-7. Beat them up pretty bad. So Minnesota will have to have a better record if they want to shot at that number one seed. The San Francisco 49ers, they gave up their first points in the second half in 5 games. They're on a roll right now. They have won 5 in a row. They were 3-4 after that loss to Atlanta. They've won 5 in a row. They beat up a pretty good Miami team last week. Defense has been outstanding. They've only given up 190 points allowed, and I believe that's number 1 in the NFL, if I'm not mistaken. That is number 1. They're the only team that's allowed less than 200 points. And they've got Tom Brady and the struggling Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense scored 217 points, 219 points allowed. Tampa Bay is in 4th, the 6-6 record. Again, like the AFC South, somebody's going to win that because the game against New Orleans could have been a big game for New Orleans. They could have been 5-8, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers could have been 5-7. And if that's the case, there would have only been a half game back. Saints on a bye this week. Carolina won their game last week. They could have been right in it. Atlanta lost their game last week to Pittsburgh. They could have been right in it as well. They're on a bye as well. Are the Falcons. They are going to go with Desmond Ridder at quarterback for them when they come back off their bye. All right, let's get to the games here a little bit. Now you have the NFC. Let's get to the games a little bit. As you see, the ticker going across with all the games for this Sunday, for today, this afternoon. Detroit is 2 versus Minnesota, 52 the total. How about that? The Lions at home, favored against the 10-2 team. Shows a lot about Minnesota right now. Kirk Cousins, Dalvin Cook, Justin Jefferson, a good trio right there. But the Lions have scored points in bunches these last few weeks, and they are on. They've won 3 of their last 4. They had the Thanksgiving loss, but they're 5-7. Everybody's way back in the north, but still a 2-point favorite for Jared Goff, Dan Campbell, and the Detroit Lions over Minnesota, 52 the total. They can score points at home. They've shown that. Last week they did to Jacksonville. Minnesota coming off their game last week as well. They were, I have to remember where they were. They beat up on the Jets. They held the Jets off at the goal line. 3-point favorite. They were able to cover that game, hold the 2-point conversion, and then get a 4th down play. So Minnesota having a tough time scoring. They play a lot of close games, a lot of one-score games. That proved beneficial for them when they beat Buffalo on the road. The Buffalo Bills, speaking of which, they're playing the Jets. They have the Jets this weekend. They want to get a win back against them after losing to them, keep their best record status and form. 10-point favorite, 43 over the New York Jets. The Jets are going to go with Mike White. That pass rush has been outstanding. They got to Josh Allen last time. Bills are going to have to find a way to run the ball, going to have to find a way to eat up some clock, stop that pass rush. Josh Allen cannot have red zone turnovers. That's been their biggest problem all year. The games that they've lost, he's had turnovers in the red zone. I mean, they could be undefeated right now. They could be 12-0 right now if it weren't for some of the turnovers and some of the mistakes they had. The Jets lost, the Dolphins lost, the Minnesota Vikings lost, all losses that could have been wins. If you go back and watch the tape, they could have won those games. They had Miami on the 2-yard line, couldn't get it in. They had the Jets a last few minutes drive to be able to go up with the score there, and then New York got a defensive touchdown, I believe, that kept that spread more than a 1-score spread. And then the Minnesota game that went to overtime, they had 2 turnovers. Josh Allen had 2 turnovers in the red zone there as well. So Buffalo 10-43, Pittsburgh 236.5. We talked about it already. Kenny Pickett, the starting quarterback. Najee Harris back. Pickens, the wide receiver. Baltimore going with Huntley at quarterback. They're going to have Dobbins as well active for the Ravens. They have an 8-4 record and are tied with the Bengals. They beat the Bengals earlier this year, so they have the tiebreaker edge. But that division, far from over. The Bengals are red hot, and we'll get to them in a second. The Philadelphia Eagles are a 7-point favorite at the Giants. We saw what happened on Thursday night with Vegas. Road favorites are tough. And this is the battle. This is Eagles-Giants. This is Eagles-Giants week for those East Coast fans. Those NFC East fans have seen these games go one way or the other over the years. 44.5 the total. Saquon Barkley listed as questionable, but A lot of people think that he's going to play. Jalen Hurts has been outstanding, leading MVP candidate right now for the Eagles. They're 11-1, the best player on the best team. Sanders has been running the ball well. They've got receivers. Goddard's been good at tight end. A.J. Brown tore up his former team, the Tennessee Titans, last week in a blowout win over the Titans. So they're a 7-point favorite going into the Giants this weekend. That's a tough place to play. I don't know if I'd lay 7 points on that, but you have to see the best bet segment to see if that's the case. Cincinnati, we just talked about how hot they are. They're on a 4-game winning streak. I believe they're on a four-game winning streak. They thumped Tennessee 2 weeks ago. They beat Kansas City. Jesse Bates, their safety, got fined by the league for faking an injury. So did Cam Jordan, by the way, for the Saints. So the league coming down hard on that. But I think the Cincinnati Bengals would take the win. They're 8-4. All these records. So you're looking at 9-3 Buffalo, 9-3 Kansas City, 8-4 Baltimore, 8-4 Cincinnati, 8-4 Miami. All have a shot at the number 1 seed still. Go figure how that's going to go. The Dolphins, but the Buffalo 6-2 in the conference. Are tied with the Dolphins, 6-2. They're in the same division, and Miami has the edge there. They're a game back. Cincinnati is 1-3 in the division, so that may come back to haunt them if they can get a win versus Baltimore, because the next tiebreaker after head-to-head is your division record, and then it's common games after that, which I think the NFL changed a few years ago, and that's been really good for their part. All right, so you got Cincinnati 5.5. Deshaun Watson had a mediocre game in his first game back after a year, 46.5 the total. They can score some points. Watson is very capable of scoring some points. Cincinnati gave up 24 to Kansas City last week, but held when they needed to. The Tennessee Titans are 3.5 versus Jacksonville. They've struggled. They've lost 2 in a row. They are minus 21 in point differential. When they play bad, they play bad. But when they play good, they play really well. Jacksonville can score. We saw their bad game against Detroit, but they beat San Diego, or they beat the Chargers 2 weeks ago on a 2-point conversion. They beat the Ravens 2 weeks ago on a 2-point conversion. Trevor Lawrence is questionable, but it looks like he'll play as well too. 3.5 for Tennessee, 41 the total for Jacksonville. Dallas 17.5 versus Houston, 44. You know how I feel about laying touchdowns in the NFL. Everybody has athletes. I know Houston's eliminated. I know they're 1-10, 1-10-1. Let's give them credit for that tie. But 17.5 points, a lot of points in a row, and backdoor covers take place all the time as well too. So it's going to be hard to predict that as far as 17.5 points versus the Houston Texans is a lot of points to go there. But Dallas right now in the number 5 spot in the NFC, they are 2 games back of Philadelphia in second place in the NFC East. They have a loss already against Philadelphia, so that doesn't bode well. And they've got their game on Christmas Eve. But right now they have the Houston Texans to contend with this afternoon. All right, when we come back, we'll go through the afternoon games. We'll give you our best bet segment. Also, don't forget, at noon Eastern, I will have the non-NFL picks best bet segment on the Daily Post on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter as well too. This is the VPartySports Podcast. I'm Vasu Vadaparty. We'll be back in 30 seconds with the best bet segment, the second half of the afternoon games, and a preview of what's to come on Sunday Night Football as well too. Some really good games in the afternoon. We'll have all those previews. We'll give you our best bet segment. It's back in 30 seconds. Okay, welcome back to the VPartySports Podcast. I'm your host, Vasu Vadaparty. Segment number 2, the afternoon games of the NFL. Don't forget, we'll be back on Monday, 3 o'clock Eastern, 12 o'clock Pacific time with a full NFL recap. NCAA and NBA hoops from the weekend. What a weekend it was in the NCAA basketball. Just watched the number 1 Houston Cougars go down to the Alabama Crimson Tide. I know Alabama's got a bowl game, and that's a football crazy state, but their basketball team's pretty good and coming up against number 1 in Houston to beat Houston. Don't forget Daily Post every day at 6 p.m. Eastern weekdays I'll have a daily post for you at noon tomorrow after this show for the non-NFL picks that we have for the best bet segment. NBA, NCAA, NHL games are there as well. All right, let's get to also we'll have a guest tomorrow too, and I'll promote that as well later, but we'll have that 3 o'clock Eastern, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. Thanks to everybody on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. All the comments, you can reach me right there at the bottom at VPartySports. All right, the second half of the day, we'll have the Kansas City Chiefs. We just talked about them. Second in the AFC. They lose the tiebreaker to Buffalo. They're a 9-point favorite. These are updated to the minute. 9-point favorite at Denver. We know about Denver's woes offensively. Russell Wilson has not come in and done what he's going to do. 44 points the total. They don't score very much. In fact, Denver is only averaging in 10 games. They're averaging 16.6 points. They're giving up 20.4 a game. They've lost 4 in a row. They had the win against Jacksonville. That was the last one they had. That was in London. They haven't won in the United States in 4 weeks now. And Denver coming in last place, 3-9. Russell Wilson still the quarterback there. They are 2-3 at home, 1-6 on the road. So they've got a chance. Kansas City doesn't cover point spreads very well. The Chiefs are 4-2 on the road. However, they're 3-0 in the division, 5-3 overall in the conference. And they had the tough loss at Cincinnati last week. The Bengals came back and took the lead back from Kansas City after having the lead for part of the first half. Bengals made a good comeback. They are red hot right now. It wouldn't surprise me to see Kansas City and Cincinnati in a rematch of last year's AFC game. But 9-point favorite for the Kansas City Chiefs. Latavius Murray getting a lot of the carries now for Denver. They're a 9-point underdog. I think if they can hold the ball and keep it close, I think they've got a shot at Denver, maybe even at least keeping that game close and maybe even upsetting them. They're not a bad team. Defensively, they're pretty good. They just can't score right now. The Seattle Seahawks, 4-point favorite over the Carolina Panthers, 44 the total. Seattle 1 game behind the San Francisco 49ers at 7-5. They are in 7th in the wild card spot. They are a game back of those hot 49ers right now. It's going to be a matchup, Carolina and Seattle, of 2 former New York Jets teammates, Geno Smith for Seattle, Sam Darnold for Carolina. Carolina's been able to run the ball the last few weeks. They won their last week's game. And I have to remind myself who they played last week. They played the Denver Broncos. In fact, they beat Denver on Thanksgiving Sunday, 23-10. Denver, we said, had no offense, but this is a home game for Denver against Kansas City. But that being said, the Panthers got a 23-10 win over Denver last week. They travel west to go to Seattle, who lost last week. They were off last week. Let me see if I got that right here. They had their bye. Boy, I'm so glad these byes are going to be over. Yeah, they had their bye last week. But before that, they lost to the Raiders on the overtime walk-off by Josh Jacobs. So right now, they are in a little bit of funk. They won their last game against the. Oh, wait a second here. Hold on here. Let me see if I got this right here. They played Thanksgiving weekend. They lost to the Seahawks. Week 13, they beat the Rams. That's right. They beat the Rams last week. They did not have their bye. DK Metcalf at the end of the game did not cover the 7 points on the road. Same for the Raiders on Thursday night. But the Seahawks beat the Rams 27-23 in that game. So that's what we have for Seattle and Carolina. A big game for Seattle. They need to maintain with the 49ers. Speaking of those 49ers, game of the week, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Tom Brady, former Bay Area native, comes into San Francisco. Don't call it San Fran, Tom. You're going to upset the 49ers fandom. And you grew up here. You should know better than to call it San Fran. It is San Francisco by way of Santa Clara, by way of the South Bay, by way of Levi's Stadium. 3.5-point favorites for the 49ers. They've only allowed 7 points in the second half in their last 5 games. This 5-game winning streak coinciding with that great second half play. They spread themselves out. They increased the margins in the second half. But 3.5 points is the line for Tampa Bay. That's awfully tough. If it was 3 or less than 3, you would have to think the Niners would be the way to go here. But it'll be interesting at 3.5. And I think the Sharps in Vegas know exactly what they're doing by setting that thing at 3.5. 37.5 the total. You know about the Buccaneers' struggles. They looked awful for 57 minutes Monday night against the New Orleans Saints. 49ers gave up a few yards to Miami, but in the end, the defense came up, big fumbles, big interceptions to get that win over Miami. And then Sunday Night Football, those Miami Dolphins, who are 8-4, one game back in Buffalo, they have won 2 of their last 3, I believe, and then they lost last week to San Francisco. But they're going to SoFi Stadium to play the Chargers. They're favored by 53.5 the total. That line went up from 51.5 to 53.5. Both teams can score. We know Miami can score. They gave up 38 points to the 49ers, and a lot of that was Tagovailoa's turnovers. He threw 2 interceptions. He fumbled once toward the end, and that was their demise against the 49ers. If they had won that game, they could have been right there with Buffalo and still been in first place. But now they're a game back. They do have the tiebreaker over Buffalo. Chargers fighting for their playoff lives. They are in the number 9 spot. They're tied with the Patriots, but they lose the tiebreaker because of best winning percentage in conference games. That's the advantage New England has over the Chargers right now for the 8th spot. And then if they can somehow catch the Jets, they might be able to get into that 7th spot. And then who knows what happens with New England at that point. All right, so those are your games. And then Monday night, we'll talk about Monday night's game on Monday, but the Patriots are going to Arizona. They're going to be without some key pieces as well, too. So those are the games that we have for Monday night. The New England Patriots at Arizona. Those are the Sunday games that we have going on right now for the NFL for the Week 14. Now, some injury notes to note is J.K. Dobbins, we said, for the Ravens is in. Lamar Jackson is out. They have let me see if we got this right. I saw a bunch of these notes. Mike White's still a quarterback. Joe Mixon's been questionable. He limited practice this week for the Bengals. Trevor Lawrence is questionable for the Jaguars. Saquon Barkley, a big one for the Giants, he's questionable. They're trying to stay in. As of right now, the Washington Commanders are just a half a game behind Seattle. Otherwise, all 4 teams in the East would be in the playoffs as of right now. Ravens, Steelers go at it. Chiefs, Broncos. The Buccaneers, 49ers. That's the huge one in the NFC on Sunday, or this afternoon. The Buccaneers in first place in the NFC South. They'll probably win the division. They'll have a worse record than the top 2 playoff teams, and the 49ers trying to improve that 4-game winning streak as they're at 8-4 right now, playing as well as anybody. Panthers, Seahawks, big game for the Seahawks. Dolphins, Chargers, Sunday Night Football, that got flexed in. The Broncos and Chiefs were the ones that got flexed out of Sunday Night Football. And then Monday night, the Patriots and the Cardinals. All right, let's get to best bet segments here for Sunday football, NFL Week 14. Some tough lines here in the NFL. Let's start with the early games here. I'm going to go with the Buffalo Bills. They owe the Jets big time after the loss early in the year. 10 points seems a lot. I know it goes against the theory of a touchdown or more as a favorite, but they're at home and they can move the ball. And the losses that they've had have been their own mistakes. And believe me, this is a rivalry with the Jets. The Jets defense has been playing great. Mike White has been really good. They lost on the road to Minnesota and now have to go back to another quality team and play the Buffalo Bills on the road again. That might be too much for the New York Jets. So lay the 10 with Buffalo. Cincinnati is hosting Cleveland. We know about that rivalry, the Ohio rivalry. Cincinnati Bengals, 5.5-point favorite is what I'm taking. Deshaun Watson is back for the Browns. They look good against Houston. He was mediocre. Their defense played well, but they're going to have to get after Joe Burrow. He's been sacked a lot this year. The pass rush for Cleveland has been pretty good, but I got a feeling their running game with Mixon and Perrine have both been good. Of course, Jamar Chase is back for Cincinnati as well, too. And they've got Higgins. They've got Boyd. They've got a pretty good running game. Their pass rush is really good. Cincinnati's pass rush is really good. And we'll see how fresh Deshaun Watson is after a full week of practice, after playing his first game in a year. Missed 11 games. Started off against Houston. All right, the Vikings. We told you Detroit can score a lot. The Vikings are 10-2. They're really good. They went on the road a couple times this year and won close games. And I think a 2-point spread for the Lions. I think if the Lions are favored against any team above 500, it has not fared well for them. So the Minnesota Vikings +2 in the game against the Lions. Pittsburgh, -2 over Baltimore. No Jackson. Very little running game. The defense has not been able to stop rushing yards right now, and I think that Pittsburgh can run. Pittsburgh's defense played well against Atlanta, played well against Indianapolis. They're on a roll right now for Mike Tomlin. All right, the afternoon games for the NFL for Week 14. All four of them on the board. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers +3.5. Hey, it's Tom Brady. What can you say? Comeback, Mr. Comeback. I know the 49ers defense has been outstanding, but you don't think he's studying and trying to figure out a way to beat the 49ers? And that half a point extra, it could be a field goal game either way. And that half point, I'll take that half point extra. I'll take that half point extra and go with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at +3.5. Denver, we talked about it, at home. Their defense has been really good at home. They don't score a lot of points. Kansas City had a tough road game at Cincinnati where they came out with an L. They're going into Denver again this week as a road favorite, as they were last week. They were, I want to say, they were a 2.5-point favorite on the road last week at Cincinnati, but here they're a 9-point favorite at Denver. I think it's too much for Denver. The over the 7-point rule for the home dog, we go for there. So Denver +9. Seattle -4 over Carolina. They need this win. Carolina's been pretty awful this year. Geno Smith has been really good for Seattle. They're running the ball very well. Defensively, they've rushed the passer really well. They've had a tough time in stopping the run. So Carolina can run the ball. This could be a tight game. And Seattle, not a great team, so 4-point favorite seems to be accurate for them. And then Miami, -3 at the Chargers. Miami looking to even up the score with Buffalo in the AFC East, looking to improve on that number 6 standing in the playoff. Tagovailoa coming off a bad game versus the 49ers. He and Justin Herbert were drafted in the same class. Tua was first. Justin Herbert was 6th, although I thought he should have been higher. The offensive line for the Chargers is all banged up. Pass rush for the Dolphins is going to be all over that like you wouldn't believe. And you got a feeling Justin Herbert's going to have to rely on Eckler, the running game. He's going to have to rely on their receivers, Allen Williams and DeAndre Carter, Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, DeAndre Carter as well too. So there are your games. Tampa Bay +3.5, Denver +9, Seattle -4, Miami -3. The early ones, Buffalo -10, Cincinnati -5.5, Minnesota +2, Pittsburgh -2. So a couple of underdogs, a few favorites, no totals this week as well too. And don't forget tomorrow we'll be back 3 Eastern, 12 Pacific with a full NFL recap. We'll break down the standings, playoff implications. We'll also talk NCAA, NBA hoops, daily posts at 6 Eastern online on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. If you're interested in sponsorships, please inquire. Reach out to me, Vasu VParty, the VPartySports Podcast. You get to me at that Twitter handle, at that Instagram handle, at VPartySports. We will see you tomorrow, 3 o'clock in the afternoon on the East Coast, 12 o'clock on the West Coast. Vasu VParty here for the VPartySports Podcast. I am out. Enjoy your Sunday. Good luck on your fantasy football. Good luck with your games. And we will talk to you tomorrow after a full Week 14 of NFL action. Have a great afternoon, great evening, everyone. Talk to you soon.